What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined this morning by Daniel Starkand, here to talk about the Dodgers pitcher who, over his last two starts, has been fantastic, and that is James Paxton, a.k.a. Big Maple. Daniel, last night, 7 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts. Unquestionably his best performance of the year. Yes, it was against the Rockies, but it was also in Coors Field. This is actually 2 consecutive really good starts for James Paxton after his worst start of the year prior to that. His last 2 outings, 13 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned, 3 walks, 10 strikeouts. I'm curious, I always joke, like you pitched in college. Obviously, we're not saying you were like some D1 pitcher that was bouncing around the minor leagues.
Why not? Why not? No, I'm kidding.
You understand more about pitching than I do. Like when you watch a guy like Paxton, these last 2 outings against the Rangers, against the Rockies, are you seeing anything different in what he has done? Or is this just like a string of good performances that maybe don't have something that you could point to?
I mean, I would say the biggest difference is the walks. Like you see only 3 walks in 13 innings pitched, and I wouldn't say that's like elite by any means, but I think when you look at James Paxton's season as a whole, like I think he's averaging 1 walk every 2 innings. So the fact that he's able to cut that down is huge. And we haven't seen a ton of swing and miss from him this year. And I think in that start last night in Colorado, obviously he had 8 strikeouts and 7 innings or whatever it was. So that's great to see. Like he's typically been a guy to strike out like at least around like a guy an inning in his career. And this year it's just way down. So for the most part, what we've seen from him is no swing and miss, no strikeouts, a lot of walks, and that's just not really a recipe for success. Like if that's kind of your profile, you're relying on a lot of soft contact, like a lot of hard hit balls right at guys, and that's just not really sustainable. And so I guess it was good to see more swing and miss last night. Obviously, Coors Field is not the easiest place to pitch. So I do think it was a really positive outing. I'm not sitting here saying that Paxton is the Dodgers ace or he's in the postseason rotation or whatever the case may be. But when you're talking about how a guy like Yoshinobu Yamamoto just went down and we're not sure when he's going to come back, like the Dodgers are going to need, all their starting pitchers to produce, in the next couple months to kind of keep this team, in first place and in a playoff position. So it's good to see Paxton have a good outing like that, especially when you're coming off the news of Yamamoto and Mookie Betts. Like vibes might be a little low at that point. So for him to have that outing and kick off a 4-game series in Colorado by giving the team some length and saving the bullpen a little bit is really good to see.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And, 7 innings, a season high for Paxton. And you mentioned the strikeout and walk numbers. Obviously, when those numbers are basically the same for a season, that's really, really bad. So for him to create some separation between those 2 numbers, but even the box score last night, I feel like doesn't totally do it justice because the only base runners he allowed, he gives up a solo home run in the second, guy reaches in the third. Then it was a 2-out single in the 6th and a 2-out walk in the 7th. So when you're giving up a solo home run, 2-out base runners, and then the error, which was his error. So he deserves a little bit of blame for that. I mean, that's a key thing. And then the season high strikeout rate. And again, yes, it's the Rockies. They're 4th in the league as far as most strikeouts per game when they're at home. But it's also Coors Field. Like I joked with Blake the other day, we can't all be nervous about Coors Field, which we are and which we should be based on history. And then also after the fact say like, oh, well, it doesn't count because it was just the Rockies. There's something to be said about going into that place and pitching well, which Paxton did. So I kind of, Daniel, over the last, 12 hours, tried my best to pour through the data, go on Savant, look at pitch mix, look at all that kind of stuff and say, is there anything in these last 3 outings that have changed? Because back on June 5th against the Pirates, Paxton had his worst start of the season. 1 2/3, 6 hits, 7 runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. Since then, I mentioned 13 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned, 3 walks, 10 strikeouts. And so my question was like, what's the key? Has anything dramatically changed from that start against the Pirates to these 2 starts against the Rangers and against the Rockies? And I looked at all the stuff. It was a pitch mix. No, there was no change as far as he's not throwing the fastball more, the curveball more, anything like that. Spin rate, velocity, no change. Movement, horizontally, vertically. Is he getting better movement? No. Whiff rate, not really like a huge change, or at least an indicator. I went through good starts and bad starts, and sometimes he has a good start with a good whiff rate, and sometimes he has a bad start but still has a good whiff rate. So there's not really an indicator there. Extension, how far he's getting out over the ball. So this is kind of where we veer into territory of I'm just looking for things that are different over the last two. And, I joke that Lance Brzezowski, Rob Hill, guys we've had on the show, they would know a little bit more about this. But the one thing that I found that seemed to be different, and this is not me standing up here as an expert saying this is the key to James Paxton's success. It's more so, I would love if somebody asked the Dodgers or James Paxton in particular if this is a conscious change, and B, just something to keep an eye on moving forward. But it's actually his release point, and both vertically and horizontally. So your horizontal release point is as it relates to the center of home plate. How many feet to the left or the right are you off? Obviously, Paxton's a lefty. His release point has moved back towards the middle of the plate a few inches on every single pitch over the last two outings. His fastball was 2.5 feet off the plate to start. Now it's 2.25 feet off the plate. Curve 2.39 to 2.18. Changeup 2.35 to 2.07. Also, vertical release point has gone up. That bad start was the lowest vertical release point of any start all season on every single one of his pitches. Every pitch was coming out less than 6 feet above the ground. Since then, everything has normalized a bit and come back up. So something to keep an eye on, something to pay attention to. Again, maybe it was just they played the Rangers without Corey Seager, without Young, without Evan Carter, and then they played the Rockies. Or maybe Paxton, sometimes you find, and Daniel, this is kind of where I wanted to ask you as a pitcher, sometimes moving just a few inches on the rubber, we've heard about that type of thing being the catalyst to change. I don't know if his feet have moved or his just release point has moved, but is there anything that you can talk to on that front as a pitcher as to maybe why there's a little bit more or less success?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, pitching is like a very complicated thing that a lot of
Yeah.
people don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of, and sometimes like the smallest little changes like could make the biggest difference in the world. Like you're talking about release point, like if that's not synced up with your mechanics, then that could lead to your command being off. And we're talking about a guy in Paxton who probably leads the league in walk rate or is close
Yeah.
to the top. So if his mechanics aren't synced up, if one little thing is off, that could screw up everything. So maybe they did make some sort of adjustment. Maybe he moved on the rubber. Maybe he tinkered with his mechanics a little, and his release point is better now, and that's kind of leading to this success. I would say we got to see kind of more of a sample with it. I think that's really good digging by you, and if it kind of continues moving forward and success comes with that, then I think maybe they potentially found a pretty big change. And I think that's kind of what the Dodgers are so good at, right? Like they kind of identify these things that they could tweak and turn an average pitcher into a great pitcher, or a bad pitcher into an average pitcher, or whatever the case may be. Like sometimes it's just one little change, and that makes all the difference. So I definitely think it's something to keep an eye on moving forward. Like we're not sitting here saying, Paxton is back to being an ace or just because of these changes or whatever. So I think it's good if they did identify something like that, because I think what we've seen from him, so far this season, like is definitely not sustainable. Like you should be walking or striking out a lot more guys than you're walking, and that's kind of not what we've seen from him. So I think if you look at his Savant page, there's a lot of blue there. But the extension is the one thing that he's actually good at. Obviously, he's a really tall guy, and if he could get down that mound, that's only going to help him and have his release point synced up and such. So definitely something to keep an eye on, and hopefully, they did find something, and that's kind of what's leading to these improvements.
Yeah, you mentioned the word sustainable, and I think that's the key word, because yes, the ERA has been good. I believe it's down to 3.65. His expected ERA, though, based on all of the underlying metrics, like what would you expect based on the strikeout rate, the walk rate, the hard hit rate, all of that is 4.65, which is the 22nd percentile in Major League Baseball. So on one hand, kudos to James Paxton for limiting runs while not limiting walks and hits. A 1.31 whip is terrible. But at the same time, okay, cool, that has worked. It's not going to continue to work. And so some things are going to have to change. And hopefully, like we said, hopefully he finds a little bit of sustainability. Speaking of tweaks, tonight for the Dodgers, Walker Buehler on the mound versus Austin Gomber of the Rockies. Good news for the Dodgers. A couple really strong starts from starters back to back here. So the bullpen should be well rested. They were able to, even last night, just sort of have JP Fire Eyes and eat that one a little bit and get through 2 innings to save the bullpen. Buehler versus Gomber tonight. I'll throw out two of my best bets. Daniel, you tell me what you want. You're not going to like the first one. I'm warning you. But I've got Walker Buehler under 15 and a half outs recorded, minus 120. The reason being, I'm looking at his last two starts. He's gone 5 and 3 innings in his last two. This after going over that number 3 straight times. So he's gone under 4 out of 7 starts. I'm taking into account the Coors Field effect here. And also the fact that the Dodgers bullpen is fairly well rested. I think he might have a shorter leash now that they've been able to kind of reset, recharge a little bit. So I've got Buehler under 15 and a half outs, and then Gomber under 6.5 hits allowed, which again, it seems like a very anti-Dodger set of best bets. But I looked through his hits totals throughout the season. Gomber has gone over 6.5 hits one time all season, and happened to be his last outing at Minnesota. He gave up 11 hits, but literally every other start, which I believe is 12 or 13 starts, he has gone under that number. So if you're telling me I get a number under 13 out of 14 starts, yes, I know it's the Dodgers, but under 6.5 hits, I still think the Dodgers will win this game despite both of these numbers being unders. But what do you think about those two stats?
First of all, I would say like the Rockies actually have a pretty underrated rotation. Like for a team that's as bad as they are, like when you look at their starting rotation, they have a lot of guys who are having really good years, and I think Gomber is kind of one of them. And then as far as Buehler goes, like I don't even like I don't look at that as a negative necessarily. If they could get like 5 solid innings out of Buehler, like you mentioned, like the bullpen is rested, like I think you would gladly take that. Yeah. And when you're talking about an outing at Coors Field, so. Obviously Buehler hasn't exactly pitched well his last few outings, but a nice chance to kind of get back on track here against a Rockies offense that isn't exactly lighting the world on fire. But yeah, even if they could get 5 solid innings out of him, with a rested bullpen, you'll take that.
Yeah, Gomber, you mentioned. I mean, at the end of May, he had a 2.76 ERA through a decent sample size. Has been really bad in June. His last outing, 3 innings, 8 earned runs. That ballooned the ERA all the way up to 4.26. All 3 starts in June have been bad, though. He's got a 12.27 ERA. So maybe the Dodgers can capitalize there and get on top of Gomber. And then, again, give the bullpen some low stress work as Walker Buehler tries to work himself back into the shape that we're all kind of hoping that he'll get to. So Scott and I will be here live on the Dodger Blue YouTube channel for a post-game show tonight. Remember, it's an early game, 5:40 p.m. So as soon as that one ends, which knowing my luck will probably be like 9 o'clock after 14 innings, we will be here. So come join us. We'll talk that. We'll talk all-star voting. We'll talk Rojas and his performance in light of Mookie Betts. Hopefully another good performance from him tonight. So please make plans to join us again around 8 o'clock right here on the Dodger Blue YouTube page. That is Daniel. I am Jeff. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. As always, go Dodgers.